you.
Good evening. I'll ask everyone that's present to stand and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve tonight's meeting agenda as stated. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Wood. Any discussion? Hey, Chris, she's itching to vote. This is nice not having to do a roll call, though. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. If anyone here in the meeting was looking to speak before the board, there's a sheet up here, but basically just kind of say something now, and we'll be glad to offer you the time. If not, yeah, if anyone online would be looking to present a topic to the board, I'd ask you to put it in the chat message window and just list your name and topic, and Mr. Colbert will let us know if something comes in there. We'll give it just 30 seconds.
Nope.
All right, no one here, so we'll dispense with the community open forum and move into our regular agenda. Can I get a motion to accept item D in its entirety, personnel?
I'll second.
Motion by Mrs. Fishman, second by Mr. McCarthy. Any discussion on D? All those in favor? It's unanimous, thank you. And can I get a motion for item E in its entirety?
A motion. Second.
Motion by Mrs. Fishman, second by Mr. McCarthy. This is the recommendations for the Committee on Special Ed, approval of a donation, and approval of the updated Safety Patrol Officer Agreement, which is really just updated dates for the new year. So any discussion on those? All those in favor? Thank you. And then turn it over, I'm guessing, Mr. Colbufo for the continued conversation on reopening.
Yes. So basically, I just want to kind of give an update on where we're at. The governor had put a new executive order in place about a week and a half ago, and he said by August 21st, every school district in New York State had to have a parent meeting and a teacher meeting. But we had much more than just 2 meetings. So what we did was we separated the elementary parents from the secondary parents, and we did the same thing, separating the secondary teachers from the elementary teachers. So when we first put this out there, the next morning was the first secondary meeting, so we wanted to be fair, so we scheduled actually 2 more secondary principal meetings. Secondary parent meetings and secondary staff meetings. So we've had, when it's all said and done, we will have had 2 secondary parent meeting, 2 elementary parent meetings, 2 secondary teacher meetings, and 3 secondary teacher meetings and 3 elementary teacher meetings. And the whole purpose of all of these meetings was not only to just, comply with what the governor was saying, because from the very beginning, Central Square District was very transparent and open with our plans. So we put our plan out 2.5 weeks before the July 31 deadline. We wanted parents to be able to see, what the district was doing, so then they could make a decision if they wanted at the elementary level, if they wanted just distance learning, or if they wanted the hybrid version. And that would also give them an opportunity to get daycare, in check. So it is not an exaggeration to say that we have taken thousands of phone calls from parents. I personally have taken over 1,200 from giving out my cell phone, and I'm glad that I did, because there wasn't a bad question. Parents were concerned about a number of different things, and they were asking me questions. And a lot of the questions that I have been asked talk about the spread rate, the mortality rate, and it was really asking me if I personally felt that the region was, treated fairly. And all I could say to them is that as a superintendent, I have to follow the restrictions and the executive orders from the governor. failure to comply with any of that would just mean that we would not be able to open, and we put ourselves in jeopardy of getting, $56 million a year in aid, because all money comes from the governor's office. So it was super important that we were compliant. I start every one of the parent meetings and teacher meetings talking really quickly about that 8-minute video that I sent out, and I'm just going to quickly give the 2-minute version about the 4 factors that play into everything that we're talking about right now with the reopening plan. And then I want to give a little context right now of what's going on in our county and in neighboring counties regarding the number of parents that want to keep their kids home full time. So factor number 1 was the same for all of the school districts, and I just quickly want to say that's the 145 pages of restrictions that have been put in place that mostly center around social distancing. We sought clarification. Legal has abundantly agreed with us, and that is that you need to be 6-foot separation, and only when that cannot happen, then masks need to be worn. So we sought further clarification, and times like that refer to times on the school bus. When you're walking past the seats to get off or get on the bus, you could very well be within 6 feet. The mask has to be worn. Masks have to be worn in the hallways. I know right now there's a lot of high schools in many counties in our area that are worried that what happened in Georgia could happen in their high school, because it's very difficult to be able to police and enforce that amount of kids once they get off the bus till they get their first destination, their first homeroom or whatever that is. So I know that's a worry right now with a lot of school districts. So all of those restrictions were put in place. The fact that we used to be able to get 64 elementary kids on the bus and now we have to only have 22, that is the same as 45 secondary students because they're bigger, and now we can only have 22. We do not have any walkers, so where it was kind of it was okay to some degree for suburban school districts where they have a huge walker population. We do not have that in such a rural district with 200 square miles and 3 counties that we span. So all of those restrictions, including the temperature checks, and I'll get into that shortly, had to be in place. But that was consistent for all the school districts. When we originally did our survey, we had 1,600, roughly we had 1,675, I have to go back and look at the numbers, people took that survey. And it came out to be 100, about 100, it was 10% of the families said that they wanted to keep their kids home full time. 33% of them were unsure. That's when we started making numerous phone calls and receiving phone calls, and the elementary principals put out another survey, and they actually got the names of the students that wanted to receive distance only. So then there was no confusion whether the mother took the survey and then the father took the survey. This actually had the numbers, was generated a document showing overall in Central Square, out of the 1,583 elementary kids, we have 230 that want distance learning only. That's 14%. And then when you add in the high school numbers, the middle school numbers, it brings us down to 9%. 3 weeks ago, other districts in our county and in Onondaga County and in Madison County, they were anywhere between 38% and 53% wanted their kids home full time. So then they had the opportunity to have a lot more in-person flexibility to their schooling. Again, we were at 9%. Within the past, I would say 3 days, districts now are reporting that where, let's say, some of them in Onondaga County that were saying that they were going to be 38% distance learning only, now that dropped to 18% only. So now what we're seeing is districts changing right now what they were going to be doing, and quite possibly what they even submitted to the state. So, because the limits are still the same. 10 to 12 students in a classroom. Some districts got creative and found ways to get 14 kids in a classroom. But when we did all of our measurements, 770 square footage was the average, and it was some schools, classrooms fit 10, some fit 12. So that was the second factor, and that had to do with the percentage of parents keeping their kids home. That is very different among school districts and among counties. The third factor was the minimum amount of hours I keep saying minutes, but really it's hours, and that's 900 hours at the elementary, 990 hours at the secondary level, which all fit into New York State's 180-day requirement. So if you're new to this, I will say there's an Excel spreadsheet. I have put Erin Phillips in charge of that every year. She literally takes all of the minutes in each day for each of the grade levels, elementary, middle, and high school, and we have to tease out all of the passing times in the hallway between classes at the secondary level. We have to take out recess at the elementary level. We have to take out lunch, and then if it lights up green, we're good. If it lights up red, we're not in compliance. And the reason why I say this is because some parents were saying, why don't we just focus on in-person learning, and then we won't do the distance learning part of it. Unfortunately, the distance learning part of it is the only way that we'll be able to stay green and be compliant with the state's requirement. We cannot say no to that. There's not a question that whether we agree or not, we have to comply with those minutes. And then the fourth factor was busing, as we just said. Even if some parents were saying, what if we just had every parent to commit to driving their kid? I definitely don't think that's realistic. Maybe a lot would be able to, and I'm sure that they are. But even if we were to be able to do that, that doesn't take off the table factors 1, 2, and 3. So we feel that we are doing our best to be able to get kids in. Unfortunately, if you look at the secondary level, and I've had this conversation 1,000 times with parents, and they ask good questions, but if we were to accommodate every middle school and high school kid for one in-person day, that would require, on a bare minimum, those teachers would be teaching 4 full contractual days to satisfy that requirement of one middle school and high school kid getting 1 day each. So unfortunately, if they were doing that, we have nobody then that will be able to deliver what I said in factor 3, the required minutes. There would not be enough time in the day, nor in their instructional, their contractual minutes to be able to fulfill the required amount of minutes. So those were the 4 factors. I took numerous questions. We have a 28-page document on our website. If you click on coronavirus information, it's the last bullet from the bottom to the left, and it basically is the 28 pages of frequently asked questions. And we got that by giving all the parents a Google document, and we put that on there. We also said, since that closed out, we put another link that's about 3 pages right now of parents asking. Some of the questions are on that, but some of them are brand new questions. So we're in the process of answering all those, and then we're going to put that link right under the other 28-page document. I have gotten great compliments from parents saying they had questions, they looked at that document, and they were able to make a good decision whether they were going to send their kids or not send their kids. So we are in the process of finishing up all of our parent meetings and teacher meetings. They will be done by the end of this week. If any parent has any questions at all, we just simply say, please start with your building principal and then move up from there. If it's the middle school or high school, after you talk to the principal, you want more information, I would say talk to Assistant Superintendent Connie Galvine, as she oversees the secondary. If you're an elementary parent, then talk to the elementary principal, and then Erin Phillips. And then after that, obviously for both of them, you can contact me. I have no problem of you contacting me anyway. I put my cell phone out, 315-314-1432. Some people, the questions are numerous. There's no bad questions. Some of the questions, I'll just be very frank and say that's not possible. We had a parent that wanted me to privatize the entire district like Manlius Pebble Hill, and that's not possible. Besides the startup fees of about $500 million, and then there'd be tuition at about $50,000 a year to send your kid, because we get $56 million a year, but from the state. But again, there are things like that and the minimal instructional minutes that parents would not ever have to know. So I think every question is a good question, and I will absolutely take the time. Some parents have said things like at the elementary, I don't agree with you, Mr. Calabufo, about kids bringing a lunch home. They need to eat it there. I circled all of our admin together, and that parent was right. And we made that happen. So I don't want anybody to think that everything is just set in stone and that we don't believe in customer service, because we do. So if you have any questions, again, start with the building principal, and then make your way up. You have my number and my email if you want to share any questions as well. So there hasn't been any more updates except the fact that we keep trying to bring more in person in. The middle school and Connie has done a wonderful job in bringing more elementary students that have identified that were struggling readers, that have identified certain classes that they're in, to bring them in on certain days. The high school principal is also looking for opportunities, knowing that on Wednesdays we're not running any elementary, to possibly use the buses to try to figure out how to bring certain groups to the high school doing social distancing, but it might be a certain science lab. Even though the state has said all labs can 100% be virtual to get their minutes, the teachers will sign off on, but there's going to be things that we want, whether it's, let's say, a residential instruction, a wood shop class, or small engine repair, things like that. We want to give the students the opportunities to be able to do things like that. And then we want to have, like, a social emotional maybe possible day. And I know Kristen Enright has been working with her team and with John Pierce, who, I'm telling you, John Pierce is best in the business I've ever worked with transportation. Paul Brissett is best in the business when it comes to what he's doing with building grounds. And Arena Gershman has been top-notch when it comes to technology, and that's why we have Canvas, which is a true learning management system. So, and that's the last thing that I'm going to say, is that we got about 3,000 responses from parents saying that the teachers did a great job transitioning overnight to distance learning. However, it was more set up for a platform of posting assignments as opposed to delivering direct instruction. And we have thousands of parents that were very frustrated that they said trying to teach their children, specifically Common Core math, that we didn't have growing up. So the good thing about Canvas is it's all-encompassing, which would be less chances for any glitches, where before kids would be on their Chromebook, they'd have to switch over to a YouTube clip, and then there would be a glitch and it would freeze. Well, in Canvas, you don't have to switch out of anything. So we have many people sat on that committee, and there were parents, and one of the parents I got to meet at our in-person superintendent parent council meeting last week in this very room, and this father raved about Canvas and what it's going to be a game changer, not only for the students knowing what to do, but for the parent or the aunt or the grandparent that's going to be supervising this at home. We are going to have a little cheat sheet with very simple to easy understand instructions on how parents can supervise their children with using Canvas. But also, I want to just say the state has mandated 2 forms of instruction. Synchronous instruction, which is live instruction where the teacher teaches to her whole class at certain scheduled times throughout the day and week. And then asynchronous, which is more taped, pre-planned, pre-taped lessons. So there were parents that were very concerned because they said, what if my child has to be watching, my elementary child, and something happens and they can't get on during that synchronous instruction time? Will they be penalized? No. But all I ask is what we always ask, even before COVID. If there's a situation where your son or daughter is not able to get on for whatever reason when the whole class is on, please just shoot your child's teacher an email just saying why that was not able to happen, and then it becomes asynchronous when then later on the child can go in and then do that assignment. So we are being extremely flexible. We're being flexible with the amount of homework as well. Since we're going to have more asynchronous and synchronous instruction, the last thing we want is kids to be on the screens longer than they have to be. There still has to be an assessment to see if the student is able to, grasp the material. Then let the teacher know, these are the students that I know have to make sure that, they need additional help. But it's not going to be 20 questions for, let's say a math assignment, when really after 3 questions, the teacher will be able to assess if the student knows it or not. Aaron Phillips has done a really good job talking to elementary parents, saying, let's say for math, it says 10 minutes. If you go beyond 10 minutes, that's your call as a parent. If you want your child to finish that whole assignment, you can do that, but in that case, we're only saying 10 minutes. Don't go beyond 10 minutes, unless you want to go beyond 10 minutes. So all of that stuff is going to be spelled out in something that goes home to the parents in the handbook that will be very categorized by instruction, safety, and things like that. The last thing that I will say are the temperature checks. It's become a hot question, and parents, I would say, it's not exaggeration to say I've had 300 parents make sure that they called me to say it's too late if those kids are already on the bus with a 100-degree temperature, and we agree. So the state has mandated that the districts do temperature checks. We can't just take the parents' word for it. So especially, obviously, at the elementary level, where that's the bulk of our in-person instruction, it's important that if the parent goes to work before their child goes to the bus, please take your child's temperature. We cannot let that child get on the bus. How are we going to know that he or she has a 100-degree temperature? On every single bus, besides the bus driver, we will have a staff member that will have a mask and quite possibly a shield and gloves. They will get out with a touchless thermometer, take the temperature. If it's 100, that staff member will walk that child back up the driveway to their house. We need somebody to be there. Now, if you're a parent that for whatever reason you both have to go, oddly enough, if it's a second grader or older, the county allows for them to be home as long as the parent signs something saying that you give them permission. If it's below that, that's too young to leave a minor unsupervised. So if that is the case, what we're asking for is that we're going to be reaching out to the elementary parents to make sure that there's some trusted adult that can be there, a neighbor or whatnot, because the child cannot get on the bus. We realize that's not an easy thing to ask. That's why I go back to what I said a couple minutes ago. Please check your child's temperature before you go to work. If your child has a 100-degree temperature, or very close to it, maybe 99.5, there's going to be a risk that that can spike a little bit and be 100 and not be able to get on that bus. Again, it sounds heartless to say we're not going to let the person on the bus, but the state is very clear of not contaminating or infecting other students. So the temperature checks are important. If you drive your child will have a temperature check right before they get out of your car. So we can make sure that it's not 100 degrees or higher. Staff will have the same thing. There'll be one point of entry going into the schools. That means that some of the teachers that used to like to get there an hour and a half early, they will not be able to. They'll come in at a set time every morning, and they all have their temperature checks as well. Currently, right now, all of the... yes,
Yeah, it's bad cord, I'm touching.
okay. So,
He's trying to see if it's applied.
So currently, right now, all the administrator at the district office, we have to self-report. So we take our own temperatures, there's a form that we have to fill out, and anybody coming into the building, so if it's superintendent parent council or whatnot, the forms have to be filled out. That's not a central square thing. That is a state requirement, it's a mandate. It's not a HIPAA violation. HIPAA does not apply to school districts. We were clearly told by our legal counsel. So one of the questions says, have you tested positive for COVID-19 within the past 14 days? You have to answer that. Again, that's not a central square rule. If there's any parents out there that think that we added any additional rules, we did not. The 6-foot rule in our district is not our rule, but what we are doing is 100% compliant with the health department, the CDC, the state education department, and the governor. Once students and staff are 6 feet apart from each other, you can do what we're doing right here and take your mask off. I don't need anybody to send me any information about the validity of masks. I believe in it, okay? Masks work, but here's the deal. We're not going to put a plan in place that we know there's no way we'll be able to be enforced by even the majority, of our students. You're looking at 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds. To think that they're going to be able to wear a mask for 8 hours looks good on paper. It is not realistic. And then the teachers will become the mask enforcers. And I don't know what type of instruction will get done when a teacher is constantly telling you to pull the mask over your nose, turn that mask around. So basically, we're going with what the regulations clearly say in the state education website and on the governor's website, that students should be able to take off their mask to receive instruction as long as they're 6 feet apart. So overwhelming majority of the community was very happy about that. And we didn't want to punish those kids that weren't able to wear a mask over their face for that amount of time, especially in air-conditioned elementary buildings, that would now possibly mean that those elementary kids have to be home alone or not receive the type of instruction they would receive if they were able to wear a mask for 8 hours. So if you have any questions about that, again, I will 100% take your phone calls. I already put out my cell phone number. I will be more than happy to have that conversation. That pretty much is my update to the plan.
All right, so we'll open up to the board for questions, clarification, comments.
I would just like to say two things actually. Obviously, the administration leadership team has worked, I can't even imagine how ungodly many of hours on this plan. The thing I would say about questions, if you have questions, based on what I've seen and heard over the last month or so, it's like asking a mother or father a different question. You're going to get pretty much, you guys are pretty consistent with your messages and your messaging and your responses. So just understand that if you call Principal A and then call Connie and then call Tom, I have a pretty high suspicion that you're going to get a fairly consistent message, just for the record. So, but thanks for your efforts. Again, I can't even imagine the work that's gone into this plan.
Yeah.
And we all have, I'll say a third thing, I think we all have our personal opinions, and unfortunately, that's secondary at this point. Our personal opinions and thoughts and what we believe is occurring is really not important at this point in time. I'll share it with anybody that wants to know, but it's secondary.
And Tim, I'll just comment to your comment around the consistency of the message. For the community, I have to shake my head because people are complaining about the consistency of message as if it's some, predetermined, oh, see, they all have talking points. That's what a plan should do. It should be consistent and be thought out, right? So I would ask everyone to be positive instead of negative as you're all stressing about this plan. Because to Mr. McCarthy's point, I think the administration's done a phenomenal job, and I'd stack it up against certainly any district in our county, any district in central New York, and if you want to dig into the news and look at some other districts and their lack of planning and investment of time, that is absolutely not something that can be accused of Central Square. So thanks.
Well, no, and I appreciate that. And at the end of the day, I'll give you just one example. There was a mother that I had the text on my phone, or maybe a grandmother, reached out to me to say, how is it that, and she named a couple of school districts, and said proportionally they're the same size Central Square, same amount of elementary buildings, middle school, high school, same low percentage of parents that want 100% in-person learning full-time. Distance learning, low percentage of distance learning, like ours is 9%. So she said, how are they doing it? And I said, here's a question that if you know people at those districts, I want you to ask. Call them up and say, are they putting 100+ kids in the cafeteria or the gymnasium or the large group instruction room, telling them to wear masks the whole time, trying to keep them 6 feet apart with many teachers in those rooms? And she said very nicely, I don't think that that's the case, but I will check. And you know what? I give this, I think it was a grandparent, a lot of respect, because she texted me back 34 minutes later and said, you were right. They are filling their gyms and their auditoriums and their cafeterias. A, I don't think those plans are going to be approved, but B, contact tracing. Okay, contact tracing and testing is not done by the schools. Nobody is going to be pulling kids in the hallway, out of the hallway, and giving them a swab in their nose. When the governor made an announcement that 2-3 press conferences ago, it got a lot of people thinking that their kids were going to be tested in schools. That is not the case. The county is going to be running all testing and tracing. So the tracing part of it, they know, and Ryan McMahon backed this up, as the Onondaga County, remember part of our district resides in Onondaga County, that Ryan McMahon backed it up and said they will know before schools know who has it. Because they are the ones that do all of that. Schools are not allowed to share that information. We found that out at the beginning of the first closure. So it's very important that people understand that if you're in a room, your kids are in a room with 100 people, there's a really good possibility that 200 parents could receive a phone call from that county health department saying, your child was in a room. It's cafeteria, it's still a room. And your kids and you have to be quarantined for 14 days. That means they can't go to work too. When I say that to some of the parents, then they think, oh, so there's a tipping point. Yes, we want kids in person, no doubt. If the governor lifted everything, we would try to, as quick as we could, go to full compliance with band, with sports, with after-school activities. The only caveat there is it will take at least a week to rebid all of the bus routes. Again, a district this size, to be able to then do that. Our head of transportation is going to be working with TransFinder, it's a great software program, to be as prepared as possible with those runs but they still have to get rebid. And we'll work through that, and we're gonna continue to talk about that, how quick, but the reason why I bring this up is if the governor lifts things, we're gonna rock and roll. Central Square is not imposing any additional restrictions than what the governor's already imposed. There are districts out there right now that I think are in the process of kind of changing what they originally went out there with, because they thought a lot more kids were gonna be staying at home. Now they're finding out that's not the case. So it's gonna be a struggle and a challenge for them to recreate that in-person learning that they promised parents.
So, Tom, based on that, and I know that's one scenario, the governor lifts it, I think the prevailing thought is that it's likely to go the other way. And I would just say, is there any discussion about that? Because the reality is we could never start, or we could be a couple weeks into this, and based on, as goes Onondaga County, it's likely then we're all gonna be impacted, the governor will change something. So, I just wanna encourage parents, don't assume that this is gonna be the way it is for the year. There's a very strong chance that we're gonna be forced to go remote 100%.
There is a very strong chance, whether that is a spike in a supposed second wave, or that there is enough pressure that could be put on school districts. So the Rochester City School District, the superintendent has already come out. They are postponing all in-person learning through, I believe it's in November. Syracuse City, the teachers union, very strong teachers union, voted that they don't want to come in until November, and now it's in the hands of their district office and their superintendent. If they kind of fall in place, there's a good possibility that the big five, that's Yonkers, that's New York City, that's Rochester, that's Buffalo and Syracuse, could all possibly be in the same boat. And then you could very well see other districts in neighboring counties also say, you know what? It's too hard to follow the regulations that are put in place, especially with the secondary level, trying to enforce kids going into the bathroom and not having a bunch of kids going into that same bathroom, or just the influx of students entering and leaving a building. No matter how hard you try to be able to keep them 6 feet apart and keep their masks on. We saw what happened in Georgia. There were about 300 people in the picture. 3 of them had masks on. Now, I'm not saying this to try to scare people that we should be. I want to be in person. I want, if the governor says we're doing a really good job in our area, it's below 1%, I'm all for having as normal of a school year as possible. But to Andy Martin's point, if that does happen, we will be prepared. I go back to the fact that we have Canvas now, and parents are going to see what that one parent that sits on the committee for technology said. Canvas will be a game changer than what we had to use before. That was not a learning management system. So that should be much better, especially if, let's say, 4th and 5th graders are home alone, that we are understanding that that may be the case, or they may be with an elderly person watching them. So we have to make it as easy as possible.
Any other comments or questions on the reopening plan? All right. Thank you, Mr. Kalupa. We'll move into reports then. The only one under unfinished business is Board of Education presentations, and if you were to look at the schedule currently, there's nothing planned for our next meeting, which is September 9th. The one after that is normally when we would have approved the superintendent goals. My humble suggestion to the board would be that these are not normal times. I think the superintendent goals are to navigate the waters that he's in, so I would suggest that we delay that. Let's let him get through the opening of school and everything. So
I would agree.
any objection to that?
No.
All right, so take it off the list. We'll address it when we can. And then we'll open it up for other reports. Mrs. Fishman. All right. Rest of the board, any topics, points of discussion? All right, I have 2 quick ones. Number 1, Wednesday, City Board will be hosting their kind of, I don't know what they call it, it's not a retreat, but they're a longer meeting. Part of what they'll be talking about is, just concerns and topics from local districts. So Mrs. Haskins asked that I mention that tonight. If anyone has anything they'd like her to bring up, you can feel free to shoot it over to me or directly to Vanessa. I just asked you to copy in the board that we were all aware. She has a couple things she'll be bringing up on her own, but anything that is particular to you that you'd like her to address, she'll do that. And that actually was it. So then we'll move into the superintendent's report.
Okay, just real quick, I was gonna say that, we have been doing the required Zoom meetings for parents and for teachers, more than what were required. I was gonna talk about the temperature checks, and I did that. I wanna have a good piece of good news here. We registered 66 Paul B. Moore students for summer school, 49 of the 66 passed. 74 passing rate for those who registered. That's pretty amazing, considered the amount of work that had to be made up by some of these students. The teachers did a wonderful job in doing that. That's pretty much what my report is right now. We're watching, we're seeing what the governor is doing. We're seeing the COVID stay really low, so hopefully we'll be able to get back to as much as normal as possible. Yes. I actually forgot. I told my secretary she's pulling it up on the screen, but for everybody at home, if you can't see it from the owl, if you go to our website and you click on district and you scroll down to strategic plan, and then you scroll to the bottom of that, there's a really good visual, and it's clickable. So if you click on any of those puzzle pieces, so Pearl, click on, financial responsibility, it brings you right to that part of the plan. So Arena Gershman and her team, all of the administrators, Connie Galvin, Aaron Phillips, Dr. Collins, put a tremendous amount of time into this. We had a lot of parents that sat in on the committee. We had students that sat in on this committee. It is a really strong strategic plan. It is not just wallpaper to put up to say we did it. That's really what we're doing. And I say that because it's the same thing with our reopening plan. We're not putting this up to try to make it look like we're just doing our requirements. We're really doing what we feel is the best way to follow the 145 pages of restrictions and do it in the safest way possible. So if you want to look at your own leisure at that strategic plan, we're really proud of it. And it's a great job by Arena Gershman and her technology team.
That's great. All right. We'll move into items for discussion and action. Can I get a motion to accept item H1, the approval of the 2020-2021 district-wide school safety plan?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Fishman, second by Mr. McCarthy. This includes the updated district code of conduct, district-wide school safety plan, and emergency response poster. I'll start the discussion, I guess. My only question is on the district code of conduct. Is it requirement or is it legal suggestion? And I don't know who this is directed to, but as far as all the different places we're specifically calling out, they will follow or adhere or whatever to the COVID-19 guidance.
If they didn't, that would fall under insubordination. They said we didn't need a new policy, you just link it to the regular rules and regulations of the school. So it's actually like that. Like we say students will follow CDC guidance, the Department of Health expectations outlined in the reopening plan, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess I just wonder it's so specific. Isn't that already covered under our general thing? Because otherwise, aren't we?
It's covered under just the general rules
Correct.
that we have, and then the violation is considered an act of insubordination.
Okay.
So, like, violation wouldn't be no mask. Violation is refusal to follow the rule. The rule is wear the mask.
So we're adding it in, but it's not necessarily required. We're just adding. Okay. Am I hearing you right?
We're not required to write a new policy or add to the actual code of conduct. We just outline what the rules of conduct are.
Okay. I think I got you.
Legal said we did it.
The lawyer said.
Okay. Any other discussion on H1? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Can I get a motion for item H2, the approval of the school tax warrants?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Fishman, second by Mr. McCarthy. I'll start the discussion again. This is where we have to sign after we vote on this, but we'll do that at the end of, just because there's only one more vote. So we'll get the voting done, and that way people that want to leave can leave, and we'll do all our signing, if that's good. Two more, yeah. Any other discussion on the tax warrants? All those in favor? I don't have to do roll call on that one, right? Okay. Thank Thank you. I'll make a motion for item H3, the approval of the agreement with the Pinnacle Preschool Universal Pre-Kindergarten Program. Can I get a second? Second by Mr., I don't even know who it was, McCarthy? Does that sound right too?
I did say it, yes.
All right, any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Yes. And I'll make a motion for item H4, the approval of the bus bond resolution. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. McCarthy. Any discussion? Do you want to say anything about it, Mr. No? You're good. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Now we're going to sign. Do we have to adjourn the meeting, or can I adjourn the meeting and then we sign? Perfect. So the board, don't go anywhere because we have to sign all this paperwork.
I'll make motion.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Fishman to close the meeting, second by Mr. McCarthy. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Next meeting is September 9th.